Welcome back to our community. Susie Thomas visiting with Molly McMath. She is the executive director of Compass, offering rape crisis help for those who have been victims in a number of ways. I want to give the hotline before we get started again. The hotline is 330-339-1427. That's 330-339-1427. Molly, how does a person respond if a friend tells them, I don't know what to do, I was violated? How can a person be a friend to someone who's been a victim?
First and foremost, just believe them. You don't need to question them, or just believe them. That's the first step. Second one, we would really encourage you to try to reach out to Compass or any local rape crisis agency and seek help. See what services are available. Sometimes it's easier for a victim if they have a friend beside them when they make that first call. It can be scary to know that you're needing to call a rape crisis center for the first time. And so having a friend or loved one sit beside you and giving you encouragement to make that call can make a lot of difference.
Getting to do the work that you do, I'm sure you get to see, both sides of it, the horrific side of it, but also the healing and the getting the pieces pulled back together again and moving forward. Can you tell us about some success stories?
Doing this work, I've heard a lot of people talk about victims as being weak or broken. And over the years that I have worked with victims, I have found that they are some of the strongest people I have ever met. And I am just in awe of these victims that go from a moment of crisis that turns their world upside down, and they can come out of it as a survivor, and they learn to thrive again. Because we don't want them to just survive.
Yes.
We want them to thrive in life. And that's really our goal in Compass, is for those victimized by sexual violence to receive services that will help them heal. And certainly, we have worked with many victims, both men, women, of all ages, of all backgrounds. And, although they may have a similar story, they each have their own personal fights that they have to get through, their own struggles. And just watching each of them conquer those struggles and just take one step forward. It might be a very slow process, but one step forward is such an accomplishment and something that we really value here at Compass.
One of the reasons that you see strength in victims is because you are speaking with and meeting victims who have come forward. We have no idea the countless victims who just keep it quiet and try to bury it and move on their own. What would you say to that person, that this happened to them and they just feel so afraid to put themselves through what you'd have to go through to bring it to the forefront?
I would first tell them, you're not alone. You are not alone. And any of our services are available. They are completely confidential. You can call our crisis line, talk whatever you need to talk about, ask whatever questions you need to talk about. You never have to give a name or any identifying information. So, reach out. Reach out and just see what's available, see what might be a benefit to you. And we don't ask for any information unless you want to give it.
And as you've said, it's so important for victims to not feel in any way that anything they have done caused this crime, that they are a victim, they are not a criminal. And yet, are there some things that anybody can do for prevention? Let's talk about prevention. Is there a way to prevent this from happening?
So we had talked a little earlier in the program about the services that Compass provides.
Yes.
Another big piece of what we do is primary prevention. And so Compass has school-age programs that are offered in all of the middle schools and high schools in the Tuscarawas and Carroll communities. And it's focused on primary prevention. And so what that means is we're talking to the kids about what are the root causes of sexual violence. The days of saying, don't leave your drinks unattended, don't put out any personal information on Facebook, that's kind of old and we've stepped away from that. If we really, as a community, want to start to look on how can we stop sexual violence, then we need to look at what are the primary causes of it. And that's where we look at oppression, gender stereotypes, the media influence, and how women and men are portrayed in the media. We look at what healthy relationships are. We look at bullying and sexual harassment. So all of these things combined kind of make up what we call the rape culture. And so if we really want to dig into prevention of it, we need to start teaching our children at a very young age, all the way up through adults, of what are the root causes of violence and how can we stop them.
Two things.
Easy steps would be,
Yeah, please.
When we hear a joke that is about gender or about stereotypes, don't laugh. Don't retell the joke. Speak up. If we see something that doesn't look right, we see we're at a party and we see somebody passed out, don't leave them. Don't leave them alone. Get them help. Get them to a safe place. If we see someone being bullied, speak up. Speak up and do something. Let's not be a bystander. So there are easy steps that everyone in the community can do to help stop violence.
Two things that you said there I find stunning. First of all, that this needs to be taught at the middle school level. Good grief. And second, that there is something called a rape culture. Is this prominent?
So to address your first question with the middle school,
Yeah.
Actually, middle school is a little too late.
What?
We want them to get the education, and we want to continue conversations with middle school and high school kids, but this is starting much younger. We're now looking at elementary level
Really?
age, and we do have some elementary schools in our community that have asked for us to come in and do some prevention work with the students. Now you have to understand that every level, the prevention programming is going to look different, and it's going to cover different topics. But this is a dialogue that we have to have with our kids over and over and over if we want it to make an impact.
Wow.
This isn't a one-time conversation.
Whew. Okay. Well, yeah, now I'm going to try and bring my jaw back up to the rest of my face and move on to what you said about rape culture. Is that what we have created with our media and so forth? Is that what we live in today?
Correct. So that's the term that is very widely used, and that's basically what you said. It's this environment that we have kind of created that supports sexual violence. And that's all done because of the media influence, because of oppression, because of gender violence, all those things that we talked about.
What do you mean by oppression? Who's oppressed? What's happening there?
So oppression of anybody. A lot of times we think of it as women, oppressing of women, but it's certainly any class of people if somebody else is oppressing them. It is another form of power and control over another person.
Yeah.
And when we get into that opens the door for violence.
Okay. Well, I do love that you mentioned that one of the services that Compass is providing is talking in classrooms about healthy relationships. What is it that children can know, can understand, and need to know to be able to form healthy relationships as they grow older?
So with healthy relationships, we really talk to students, and again, it's going to vary on what grade level they're at, but we really talk about communication. Being able to communicate, and this can be relationships between boyfriend, girlfriend, or just friends. In any relationship that's healthy, there has to be a level of trust. There has to be a level of respect for each other. Communication. You have to be able to have open communication.
It's so important what you're saying, but I know that one observation of young people these days is they are so technically involved that relationships seem to maybe be forming first on Facebook, on Snapchat, on Twitter, on Instagram. Maybe not so much Facebook for that generation, but some of these other social media platforms, everybody's online, and it's difficult to form an authentic relationship when you're not face-to-face and learning those skills, learning just people skills. Is that something you touch on?
It is, yes. So in our presentations, we try to keep them very active so that the kids are able to participate. And so our prevention educators do activities that try to increase their knowledge and their skills around communication. Because you're right, with this generation, they are very into social media, and there's pros and cons to that,
right.
Of course.
Another thing that comes to mind is so often, and tragically, the criminal is a family member. So how do you consult children to be able to go to someone they trust and tell them the horrible news that someone in their family, someone that should be another trusted adult, has committed this crime?
So when our prevention educators are in the schools, and we do a 5-day curriculum with the students. So students have, one of our staff there for 5 days. And by the end of the week, I think there's some trust that a lot of times builds up. And so we do get a lot of disclosures of things that have happened at home concerning the children. And so we take that step with the students. If they need to go and talk to the guidance counselor or principal, if there's a report that needs to be made, we try to provide assistance for the child and the family members. We also, in Tuscarawas County, we have the law enforcement, we have the Child Advocacy Center, Job and Family Services, all there to also try to provide support to these victims as well.
Mm-hmm. Speaking with Molly McMath, she is the executive director of COMPAS. It's rape crisis services that have been offered for the past 20-plus years for Tuscarawas and Carroll County, now merging into Stark, taking over for the Red Cross. How does this happen? How does this transition take place, and how can people reach you, Molly?
So our goal with this transition is that survivors and the community will notice very little difference. Mm-hmm. So their location will still be in the same building, just changing rooms. Their crisis line number will remain the same. You will see the same familiar faces. If you've been receiving services in Stark County, you'll see all the same faces. And so really, we're just trying to make sure that people notice very little difference for right now in the service delivery. And our goal is to be able to expand those services into Stark County even more. We know that the population there is great, and there's a lot of room to grow services.
Website?
Yeah, you can go to compassrapecrisis.org.
Great. Molly McMath, thank you so much for what you do, and thank you for joining us in our community.
Thank you for having me.